Welcome, everyone. My name is Sanjay Sarma. I'm a professor of mechanical engineering, and I'm the vice president for open learning. Welcome to the Festival of Learning. This is our there's 33 years since we started, but it's actually our fourth festival because obviously the first festival was precisely 3 years ago. This festival was organized for many reasons, but one of them is that we recognize that for an institution of higher education and higher learning, we actually didn't have a place where we could sit down collectively, get together, and talk about all the amazing things happening at MIT in the departments, in dorms, in labs, in graduate research offices, in professors' offices, at the Office of Open Learning, at TLL, in the Chancellor's office. And so this was set up precisely to try and get some of that thinking together and also get people to interact with each other. My role, I'm the vice president for open learning, and that means that digital learning, open courseware, MITx, massive open online courses, the MIT Integrated Learning Initiative, the Jameel World Education Lab, all the stuff that happens with MITx in residential, all that stuff reports into our office. Most of that actually reports to Professor Krishna Rajagopal, the Dean for Digital Learning. And this particular event is organized by Cheryl Barnes, whom I want to recognize for extraordinary amount of effort, work, and commitment over the last 3 years. I will say that I had a request that we call this the Festivus of Learning, but it is not called that because Cheryl overruled it. So if you hear me say Festivus, it's a little act of rebellion for which I will pay a penalty later, but anyway. Anyway, welcome everyone to this event. Today, we are going to have basically a three-part event. We will begin by recognizing an extraordinary individual, someone who has shaped education, not just at MIT, but frankly worldwide. And that is Professor, a dear friend, mentor to many of us here, Woodie Flowers. And I want to, in that context, also recognize a pillar of Woodie's life and a member of our family, Margaret Flowers. So our first section will be a remembrance of Woodie. I'll speak more about that in a second. Our second piece will be a keynote by Professor Alice Pauly, who's visiting all the way from Purdue, and we're really pleased to have you here. And our third event will be a faculty panel, which will be moderated by Professor Krishna Rajagopal. I also wanted to recognize and thank the Office of the Chancellor for helping us organize this event, the Office of the Vice Chancellor, I should say, and Janet Rankin is here. Where's Janet? Thank you, Janet, because again, this is a collective event. So with that, let me kick things off. I'm really sort of moved and excited to have this first piece, particularly in remembrance of Woodie. We will have three speakers. One is Zach Rolfness. Zach is an undergraduate here at MIT who apparently likes to spend more time in the machine shop than in the class. I know that you were deeply inspired by Woodie in doing that. He is one of the 2017 Dean's List Award winners for FIRST Robotics, which is another connection to Woodie's extraordinary legacy. By the way, if you've seen a robotics contest anywhere in the world, at some point its DNA traces back to Woodie's creativity at MIT and his invention of the kit contest, basically, the design contest. The second speaker is Dawn Wendell, who many of you know. Dawn has 4 degrees from MIT. She has worked in various capacities at MIT, and she now teaches design and a course I used to teach, manufacturing, 2008. And Dawn also volunteers for FIRST Robotics, and Woodie was Dawn's advisor as a freshman, as an undergrad, I beg your pardon. And finally, our third speaker is the one and only Professor David Wallace. Where is David? Oh, there he is. Okay, I was a little concerned. David told me today, I've always tried to avoid electronics. I remember all my appointments. And I had a sinking feeling that maybe I remembered the wrong appointment. But he's here. We did spend a lot of time talking. Dave started at MIT in 1994, and he has pioneered many educational approaches at MIT. For any of you who've seen, to me it is probably outside of 2007, which is the class Woodie founded, 2009 is the iconic class at MIT in design and in everything from conceptualizing design to presenting design to producing and designing the show at the end, which is in and of itself an amazing design. He is a perfectionist. He's an extraordinary teacher. He's a MacWicker faculty fellow. He is a receiver of the Baker Prize. He also received, I know from memory, the Peabody Award for a TV show he produced. And he is someone who I think I think probably comes closest to carrying on Woodie's spirit at MIT. But Woodie has really impacted a lot of us. And as I look around the room, I recognize faces of people who knew and appreciated Woodie. And then we will move on to this next section. So with that, I just wanted to kick things off by inviting Zach to come up and say a few words. Thank you, Zach.
Well, thank you so much for the introduction, and I want to say good morning to everyone. To kind of put into perspective, I just wanted to talk a little bit about my personal connection to Woodie. Growing up, like a lot of kids, I loved to build with Legos. And my mom, one year, she took me when I was 8 years old to Legoland, California. And I was stunned by seeing all the different Legos and everything. I was also a big fan of space, specifically the Mars rover. And I loved the idea that we can send a robot onto another planet and drive it around. So to my delight, at Legoland, California, they had just released their new Lego Mindstorms robotics kits. And they had an exhibit for it. So instead of riding on the roller coasters all day, I spent the whole day playing with the little Lego robots. And my mom was trying to drag me out, do some roller coasters, but I would not budge. So I spent the whole day there. But one of the things that impacted me most in my life was that when I left and then when I went into the lobby of the different area, they had a video playing from First Robotics. A lot of you guys know that First Robotics was both founded by Woodie and Dean Kamen. And when I was in that lobby, I saw a video of both Dean and Woodie coming out. And they were talking about how they were in the St. Louis Rams dome and stadium, and they were watching all these different robots compete against each other in a sports arena. And I remember Dean and Woodie both said that they wanted to see students celebrating technology and science like that we do our football stars. So I was hooked at the point. I was like, I need to do this. I need to go participate in robotics. So when I was 9 years old, I started in the First Robotics program, and I grew up ever since. I had the lucky pleasure to grow up in First and eventually meet Woodie in person. And when I was in 7th grade, I went to the World Championships where I first got to meet Woodie. I got to shake his hand, and it was kind of larger than life. It was this hero who helped inspire me to become an engineer when I was a young child, who was then in front of me. One of the things that struck me was that instead of asking me for Woodie's signature, what Woodie said was, hey, I'm wearing a jacket. Why don't you sign my shirt? Many of you guys know, but probably not everyone, but when Woodie would go to First Robotics competitions, he would wear a denim jacket of signatures from all the students in First Robotics that he would impact. So my hero, Woodie Flowers, wanted my signature as a student, and that really inspired me as a student. So growing up, I continued to compete in First. I was lucky enough to receive the Dean's List Award, which recognizes 10 robotic students across the world as kind of different exemplary students. And I remember that last year, when I got my senior year, I had just been recently accepted into MIT, which was my dream school at the time. And I remember I sat down with Woodie and had about an hour-long conversation with him. I knew he was an MIT professor, and I knew he created 270, which is now 2007. And I was like, one day I'm super excited to compete in this. And I remember what Woodie told me when I sat down with him and asked him about MIT. He said, MIT is a lot of things, and he kind of described it as what he called a meritocracy. And he says, a lot of the times as engineers and scientists, we like to get caught up in the numbers. We like to think about how we can optimize, how we can make better, how we can perform the best, how we can get the greatest grades, be the perfect we can be, and we can get caught up in that a lot. And he said, we can, a lot of the times, value that merit. As an undergrad here, I've often felt that pressure. I've often felt the need to be the best, perform the greatest, get the best scores, and a lot of the times you fail here at MIT. It's a hard school, and there's a lot of pressure. But what Woodie told me was that to remember to keep it human. And that's what I think what Woodie really exemplified the most here at MIT. He was a humanist before an engineer. He created 007 and this amazing course that what it emphasized was not just the individual performance, but the team collaboration, where you can be in a lab and you can create a device and be like, share it with your friend, and then you can learn together. One of his key phrases that he would always like to say is gracious professionalism and cooperation. There's kind of his two buzzwords that he lived by. And that cooperation is the idea that you can both compete and cooperate with others, where you can compete like crazy, but at the end, treat others with respect. And to me, that's where Woodie's legacy lives, is in those human connections where, at the end of the day, as much as we are engineers and scientists and we love to crunch the numbers, we are still humans, and we should keep it a human process. Thank you.
Thank you, Zach. Woodie is the reason I'm an engineer. I first met Woodie in 1997. I was a freshman in high school, and I had joined my high school's first robotics team. It was because my physics teacher told me that I should, and I was a good little student, so I did. Over 6 weeks, I learned about the creativity of engineering through FIRST. I learned how to connect my passions for math and science into real-world objects that could drive around and pick up inner tubes and play a game. I met Woodie at one of the events that year. I met my rock star. This person I had previously only seen on videos or on stage. Here he was in front of me, listening intently as I told him about my team's robot. He asked me questions. He looked me deep in the eyes, and he treated this 14-year-old kid as an adult worthy of time and attention. He cared about me, my experiences, and my passions. It was life-changing. I went home and immediately told my high school guidance counselor that I wanted to go to MIT. 4 years later, I came here, and I declared course 2, mechanical engineering. Back in the day, you had to fill out a paper form to declare a major, and at the bottom of the form, it asked if you had a request for who would be your advisor. I wrote down the only professor I knew in the department, Professor Woodie Flowers. I was one of Woodie's last undergraduate advisees, with him retiring during my senior year. But although he stepped away from daily duties at MIT, he never stepped away from giving me advice and caring about me as a person. That was one of the most valuable things that he taught me, the value of the human element in teaching. Over the next almost 20 years, I would run into Woodie all over campus. One time I saw him standing in the corner between buildings 6 and 16, watching the cranes work on the new Nano building. I almost missed him as I was rushing to the T. I don't know how many other people just went right past him. But I saw the ponytail peeking around the corner, and I stopped. Woodie? We stood there for probably 15 or 20 minutes, some of it talking, some of it reflecting in peaceful silence on the engineering marvels that are cranes and building technologies. Another one of his former students from 20 years before me bumped into us there, and Woodie made sure that we traded emails. He said that we cared about the same things. We cared about engineering, education, and people. He was right. This former student of his and I would go on to write a conference paper together about makerspaces the next year. That was a theme with Woodie. He cared passionately about engineering, but more so, he cared about people. He cared about the humanness of everything to do with engineering. The technology was cool, and he was excited by it, but the people is where the real magic lay. He valued each and every person he came into contact with. Sometimes heading home from first championships in recent years, I would be on the same plane as Woodie and Margaret. I'd sit with them at the gate, but then quickly the students in the airport would realize that Woodie Flowers was in the airport, and they would form a line to speak with him. And he would speak with them, each one in turn, listening closely and intently, never glancing over their shoulders to look at the clock or the gate. He was fully engaged in each person. He was immensely curious about everything. He was always ready to learn and ready to give. He made sure that the human part was the center of everything he cared about. Over the years, I've had the great honor of meeting many of Woodie's former students and friends. Knowing Woodie is like having a special secret code. It means that knowing your core values with someone else are the same. Being able to care about making the world a better place, helping people learn, those values are aligned. Woodie famously pushed back against online education. It was removing a critical element in his mind, the people element, the interaction, not just the equations, but learning how to use them for good, being mentored and inspired by someone who wasn't just there to read you the book, but someone who was invested in you and your learning as a person. When I think about the meaningful moments I had with Woodie, I don't think of anything he said to me in a big lecture hall or any of his speeches or talks, although he was excellent at those as well. What I remember most vividly are the small one-on-one moments over more than 20 years, the small interactions that were so personal and deep. When I teach, I think about Woodie, and I think about it more as mentoring, creating those small moments together with students. If we are teaching the Woodie way, we are helping guide students to become great humans who also happen to be great engineers and scientists.
Woodie Flowers. Woodie was my mentor. He was my PhD advisor. I'm the person with the hat getting help here. Woodie was exceptional in his ability to guide graduate students in the pursuit and realization of their own dreams. Just in MIT's mechanical engineering department, there are 3 faculty members that were direct graduate students of Woodie. Woodie, my colleague. As a team, we taught 270, which is now 2007. We taught 273, which is now 2009. And we taught 2744, which is graduate product design, together. And in spite of all of his accomplishments, he steadfastly worked to provide me with opportunities and support me in the pursuit of visions that I had. Woodie, my friend. We played together. We had fun. He was always open to toying with new ideas, and we did that a lot. But this is really just my story. There's a saying, children are one's legacy. And as hands-on engineering educators, we're all children of Woodie. So this was a number of years ago, and I was on a flight from Zurich to Boston. This was actually a Swiss Air flight, but I like this picture for some reason. The older gentleman sitting beside me asked, "What do you do?" I told him I was a teacher. "Where do you teach?" "I teach at MIT." "Really? Do you know Woodie Flowers?" He was the inspiration for my daughter to study engineering. Later, I was doing some work in California. We were working to set a ship on fire using mirrors. And somebody asked, "Do you know Woodie Flowers?" I never met him, but because of him, I am an engineer. And so this is Grant. So he was one of the members of the Mythbusters, which was the most popular science and engineering-oriented program on television for over a decade. And that reached millions of kids and adults alike. Right now, I'm doing some work to help bring experiential product design to a pioneering university in China. And this is Yan, outside of her home. And this is Yan today. She's an engineering professor, and I have the opportunity to work with her. You knew Woodie Flowers? He's the most revered engineering educator in all of China. Children are one's legacy. Mother Nature applies all of her rules all of the time. This is a Woodyism that I think really, in many ways, for me, sums up his teaching philosophy. Let's kind of do it for real. That's where we're really going to learn. And so here's Woodie testing a student project, right? So this is actually a shower for individuals with mobility challenges. And he's using it, right? This is hands-on education. It's real. Mother Nature does not really have favorites. And in fact, she can be tough. So these are some students with an idea that Woodie was testing that was kind of a failure. And Woodie provided honest, in-person, and sometimes kind of tough critique. And he followed that critique with his guidance and his time. So this is the same team that just failed. Okay, now let's think about this. He allowed students to develop self-confidence through their own hard-earned achievements. Woodie built a model for teaching engineering design that is now truly ubiquitous. There is no way to track the number of Woodie-inspired students that have gone on to high-impact careers as academics, as entrepreneurs, and made valuable contributions to society. Just think of how many yous have been engineers and entered the engineering profession because of FIRST. It's really not an exaggeration at all to say millions. Woodie has been a steward for our profession and also an ambassador for MIT. So now what I'd like you to do is I'd actually like you to please close your eyes for a moment. So if everyone can close your eyes. And what I'd like you to do is let's all use this moment with Woodie in mind and just think about what you would like to do to be a better educator and what you hope to contribute to advance engineering education. Please open your eyes. Thank you, Woodie. One cannot leave a better legacy than a well-educated family.
If you look up on the horizon, you see millions of firsters, and they're ready to ride down into the valley and help us. And the reason I think they have a real advantage is that they've built a robot. And the robot is a natural thing, because in that robot, every bit of the laws of nature are followed exactly. Mother Nature applies all of her rules all the time. 130 pounds of epistemological perfection. And I believe it's very clear that we're going to be helped when we have a few generations of people who stand with one leg in understanding the universe and one leg in understanding self and society. I was an odd mix because I was a Boy Scout and I collected butterflies and did science fair projects and I played football. I didn't fit in a particular slot. I grew up in a very small town in Louisiana, and both my mother and father were great mentors. My father was the creative mentor. He was a terrible businessman because we were always very, very broke. We never owned a house, but his shop was a welding and general repair shop. So Dad built things all the time, and I worked with him all the time. When I was a junior in high school, my uncle gave me a 1947 Dodge sedan. I told Dad that I think I want to make a hot rod out of it. He thought for a minute and said, well, okay, Scooter, if you want to do that, I'll help you. But if you start it, you got to finish it. In that process, I think I learned probably as much engineering as I did in engineering school, because there was a lot of things to do with very limited resources. We give each one of them a kit of materials. The students call it a bag of junk, but we've spent quite a bit of time thinking about what's in the kit. The task is really to grab this peg and try to put it into that square hole.
I was terrified of the 270 class. I mean, the whole idea of getting a box of random parts and turning it into a robot was absolutely terrifying.
Ready, get set, go!
Christina races toward the top in pursuit of another quick victory. Tony fires his arm, and he wins.
One of the things that I learned in the lab in 270 was the way to design is to iterate and to start and play and experiment. And I think that Woodie did that in his life as well.
All you need to do is go down and just drill big holes in those until you're okay. I'm devoted to the notion that it's not about lecturing at, it's about working with. And this is where the lanyard's going to be attached, and that'll be stretched out so that it pulls real hard.
He's really very much about a collaborative conversation that the students and the faculty are having and getting the faculty into a mentoring position.
I talk about teaching, but I don't think it's really teaching. I think it's helping other people learn. Saying that you're teaching implies a push, and I think a pull is a better way to think about it.
He never presented himself as the expert. He was the guide or the shepherd to try to help you find the right answer.
I would like you to have a very vivid picture of what can happen. And that almost went through a 3/4 inch piece of plywood. And I didn't cock the rubber bands very far.
He wanted people to love what they were doing and work together with each other and be in community and not fighting with each other. And so he always instilled this wonderful sense of kindness and community and collaboration.
Woodie was not about the conventional. He was always seeing the possibilities that we couldn't see.
Be yourself, be weird, and sneakers are always okay.
Once you take a job, the chances that you will have to reinforce your own creative self-image are pretty slim because the stakes get to be really high. While you're a student, you have a safe opportunity to learn about your ability to be creative.
He had this saying, get to be friends with a pit in your stomach.
Practice believing 6 impossible things before breakfast.
Woodie was an extraordinary innovator around accelerating more of humanity to be able to use all of its talent, have more people include their technical self forward, their design self forward, their collaborative self forward, and be in teamwork.
He had a way of setting an example that propagated well beyond MIT to other institutions, ultimately to other countries. People were moved and motivated by his practice. He wanted us to celebrate the feats of the mind as much as we celebrated sports that were feats of the body.
And it wasn't just that anyone can design, but that design should be for everyone.
I think there's a whole bunch of kids out there that are customizing motorcycles who would be unbelievably good engineers if they could get over the symbolic manipulation hurdle of calculus.
What Woodie made me realize is that it's not about students learning equations. That's important. Students need to be rigorous and understand how to model things, etc. It's about students feeling empowered to create.
Are you joyful? Do you feel purpose in life? These are the questions that, whether he did it deliberately or explicitly, that would come out. Sometimes he would send me photographs from his latest trip to Africa or wherever. He's a great photographer.
He has the ability to inspire. He influenced many of us to start our own enterprise, our own business.
When people talk about flipped classrooms, when people talk about blended learning, in many ways, those are all echoes of things Woodie's been saying for decades. I will forever see the ponytail and the smile, although he may be gone. So I'd like to thank MVP for producing this video on very short notice. But I have to say that when we offered this opportunity, people jumped at showing up and saying what they did say about Woodie. This could have been a 1-hour video. So with that, thank you, Margaret, for coming. And this is a very difficult time, but also we want to celebrate and remember everything Woodie did. Thank you.